Let me stay here and I'll give you what no human woman can. Alien woman begging. The skies over the alien planet of Zero were dark, with only a few stars twinkling above the horizon. A cold wind swept across the barren landscape, carrying the faint hum of alien technology. Zero was a world of strange, crystalline structures and bustling alien cities, inhabited by creatures whose intelligence surpassed that of most known species in the galaxy. However, they had never encountered anything like this before. A human ship, small but sleek, landed softly in the central square of the largest city, its engines whispering as it touched down. The people of Zira had been watching the sky for days, waiting for this moment. They had heard rumors of the humans, their strange customs, and their unparalleled creativity. But no one could have prepared them for what would happen when the first human to set foot on their planet arrived. The door of the ship hissed open, and a tall figure stepped out. The alien crowd was silent, their multicolored eyes watching closely. The human was different from anything they had imagined. Her clothing was simple, but her presence was striking. Her name was Evelyn Turner, an engineer from Earth, chosen for her skills and her ability to adapt quickly to new environments. Evelyn scanned the scene. The Zuran city was unlike anything she had seen before. Towering crystalline buildings stretched far into the sky, shimmering in the faint light of the twin moons. There were no trees, no grass, just sharp angles and smooth surfaces. Everything here felt artificial, yet somehow natural to the inhabitants. She had been briefed on the alien species, but nothing could have truly prepared her for the sight in front of her. The Zuran people were tall, with pale, semi-translucent skin and long, graceful limbs. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, and their voices had a musical quality when they spoke. They were an ancient race, known for their technological advancements and their understanding of the universe. Yet as they stood around her, Evelyn could sense a mixture of curiosity and something else, uncertainty. A figure stepped forward from the crowd, taller than the rest. His name was Zelen, the leader of the Zuran Council. His skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, and his voice was calm but commanding. "Welcome, human," he said, his voice carrying a weight of authority. "You are the first of your kind to visit Zira. We have heard much about you and your people." Evelyn nodded respectfully, taking in the strange environment. "Thank you for welcoming me. I come in peace and with great hope that we can learn from each other." Zelen studied her closely, his glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "We have studied your species for some time. Humans are unique. You are resilient, resourceful, and inventive. However, there are questions. Why should we allow you to stay here among us? What can your kind offer that we do not already possess?" Evelyn's heart raced. She had anticipated questions like this, but the weight of the moment still pressed on her. "I understand your doubts," she said, her voice steady. "You're an advanced civilization, but no species, no matter how powerful, can know everything. We humans have something you don't have: creativity, the ability to think beyond what is known, to imagine things that have never been thought of before." Zelen tilted his head, clearly intrigued. "Creativity," he repeated. "Explain." Evelyn took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Our ability to create new ideas, new technologies, new ways of thinking, things that can push the boundaries of what's possible. I've studied your technology, and it's incredible. But there's something you don't have yet, something that could make your world even greater." The Zuran leader was silent for a moment, considering her words. The crowd around them murmured softly, exchanging glances. Finally, Zelen spoke again. "You claim you can offer something we do not have, but your species is young, and your technology is primitive compared to ours. How can we trust that what you offer will benefit us and not lead to our destruction?" Evelyn's gaze did not falter. "I understand your concern. But I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to show you what we can offer, to work together to create something better. I can't promise you miracles, but I can promise that I will give everything I have to help you understand what humans are capable of." Zelen seemed to consider this for a long time. He was no fool. He knew that humans were not a threat, yet something about their nature intrigued him. He had never encountered a species that was so bold in its claims. Finally, he spoke. "Very well, you may stay. But you will need to prove your words. We will not make it easy for you." Evelyn smiled, feeling a wave of relief. "I wouldn't expect anything less." The Zuran leader raised his hand, and a group of Zuran soldiers stepped forward, motioning for Evelyn to follow. She hesitated for a moment but then nodded, her determination rising. If she was going to prove herself, this was the moment. She couldn't afford to fail, not for herself and not for humanity. As she followed the soldiers through the streets of Zira, Evelyn felt the weight of the task ahead of her. She wasn't just representing herself, she was representing all of humanity. And in this strange world, surrounded by beings who had never known her kind, she had to show them that humans were worthy of their trust. The Zuran city stretched before her, its crystal towers reflecting the light of the twin moons. The streets were filled with strange alien creatures, each one observing her with curiosity. Some of them whispered to each other, no doubt wondering what this human woman could possibly bring to their world. Evelyn wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. She had a chance. A chance to prove that humanity was more than just survival. We were about invention, imagination, and the endless pursuit of something greater. And no matter what, she would stay. She would show the Zuran people what humans could do. Even if it meant pushing herself to the limits of her abilities, Evelyn was determined to prove that Earth's greatest asset wasn't just technology or strength. It was the human spirit. Evelyn was led through the winding streets of Zira, her steps echoing softly against the smooth, transparent ground beneath her feet. The Zuran soldiers flanked her, their tall figures moving with an almost eerie grace. The city around her was a blend of alien architecture, sleek crystal spires rising from the ground like giant, frozen waterfalls. There was no warmth in the atmosphere, no sign of nature in the traditional sense, but the beauty of the place was undeniable. It felt like a world of perfect order, yet somehow, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. After what felt like hours, they reached a large central building, even grander than the ones she had seen so far. It was an imposing structure, almost entirely made of reflective materials that glittered under the twin moons. As they entered, she was led into a vast chamber, its walls covered in strange symbols and images. The air was thick with the hum of unseen technology. Zelen, the leader of the Zuran people, stood at the front of the room, waiting for her. His calm, glowing eyes studied her intently as she entered. The soldiers dispersed into the shadows, leaving her standing alone in front of him. Despite his calm exterior, Evelyn could sense the tension in the air. This was a test. This was where it would all happen. "Welcome," Zelen said, his voice low and authoritative. "You have asked for the chance to prove yourself. Now you will. We shall see if your claims are worthy of the trust you seek." Evelyn stood tall, her heart racing. She had known this was coming. She had prepared for it, but the gravity of the situation made her feel small, vulnerable. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice steady despite the nerves that twisted inside her. Zelen nodded slowly. "You say that humans can offer creativity, an ability to think beyond the known. But we are not convinced. We know the rules of science, the laws of nature. We do not believe in random, unmeasured ideas. If you wish to stay, you must demonstrate what you claim. You will work with our scientists to solve a problem, something that has baffled us for centuries. A challenge we have yet to solve. If you succeed, you may remain. If not, you will leave." Evelyn's mind raced. She had prepared for many things, but nothing quite like this. To work with the Zuran scientists was an opportunity she couldn't pass up, but it also meant facing the most difficult task of her life. The Zuran people were masters of technology, and their understanding of science was far beyond Earth's current capabilities. To prove her worth, she would need to think of something they hadn't yet considered. Zelen continued, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. Our challenge is simple in theory but impossible in practice. We need to harness energy from the Zuran core. The energy is limitless, but it is volatile. We have tried for centuries to contain it, to use it in ways that will benefit our world. But no matter what we do, it always slips through our grasp. We are unable to create a stable harness for this power. It destroys everything it touches. Evelyn listened intently, trying to wrap her mind around the problem. A volatile energy source that couldn't be contained. It sounded like something straight out of a sci-fi story, but she was here, facing it head-on. The energy is not the issue, Zelen explained further. We have gathered enough data, built enough technology. The problem lies in control. Every solution we've tested either overcharges the energy or destroys the containment systems entirely. We believe the solution must come from outside our knowledge. This is where you come in. If you succeed, you may stay. If not, you will leave and the door to zero will close behind you. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. She couldn't afford to fail, not now, not after everything she had gone through. I understand. I'll need access to your labs, your data, and your most advanced technology. I'll also need to study the energy source directly. Zelen studied her for a moment, his face unreadable. Then he nodded. Very well, you will have access to our laboratories, but remember the clock is ticking. You will have 1 week. After that, your fate will be sealed. Evelyn was shown to a large, high-tech laboratory. The walls were lined with sleek consoles and glowing screens, all displaying complex data that made her head spin. A team of Zuran scientists was already at work, their eyes focused on their tasks. They glanced at her as she entered, but there was no warmth in their gazes, only curiosity and skepticism. One of them, a tall Zuran female with silver skin, spoke first. You are the human who claims to be able to solve our problem. Evelyn nodded, doing her best to mask her nervousness. I'll do my best, but I'll need your full cooperation. We're in this together now. The Zuran scientist seemed to consider this for a moment. Then, with a small flick of her hand, she gestured for Evelyn to follow. Very well, come, let us show you the core. The team led her down a corridor to a massive chamber. Inside was a strange, swirling orb of energy, glowing, pulsating, and humming with raw power. Evelyn's eyes widened. This was it, the Zuran core. The source of limitless energy and the problem that had confounded their greatest minds. The orb was suspended in the air, surrounded by a shimmering force field that flickered as if it were struggling to contain the energy within. It was a beautiful, dangerous sight. That's impressive, Evelyn said, her voice filled with awe. The Zuran scientist next to her nodded. It is beautiful, yes, but it is also dangerous. We have attempted to create containment fields, but none have lasted long enough to safely harness the energy. If you have an idea, we are listening. Evelyn stepped closer, her mind working quickly. She had no illusions that this would be easy. The technology the Zuran had developed was far beyond anything Earth had achieved, but she knew something they didn't. Humans didn't always think inside the box. Sometimes, the solution came from looking at things differently. I need to observe the containment field, Evelyn said, her mind already forming a plan. Show me your most advanced materials, the ones you've tested and failed with. The Zuran scientists didn't hesitate. They led her to a section of the lab where various types of containment materials were stored. Each one had been tested and failed in various ways. Some were too brittle, others too reactive. But as Evelyn scanned the samples, she noticed something, a slight pattern, a subtle flaw in the way the energy interacted with the materials. Got it, she muttered to herself, a smile tugging at her lips. Did you find something? Asked the Zuran scientist. Evelyn nodded, excitement growing. I think I have a solution. It's not about using a single material. It's about combining them, layering them in ways that complement each other. If we can create a dynamic containment field that shifts in response to the energy's fluctuations, we might be able to stabilize it. The Zuran scientists exchanged skeptical glances, but Zelen, who had been observing from a distance, stepped forward. "You believe this will work?" Evelyn met his gaze, her confidence rising. "It's worth trying." And so the work began. Evelyn and the Zuran scientists spent hours testing combinations, refining the design and adjusting the materials. As the days passed, the pressure mounted, but Evelyn refused to give in. She had to succeed for her and for humanity. The clock was ticking, and with each passing hour the stakes grew higher. But Evelyn knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to back down. The days on Zira passed in a blur of activity. Evelyn worked tirelessly, side by side with the Zuran scientists, pushing her mind to its limits. The containment field was proving to be more complex than she had imagined, but with each passing hour, she grew more determined. The Zuran people had given her a chance, and she wasn't about to waste it. Her initial idea had seemed simple: combining materials in a way that would allow the containment field to adapt to the fluctuating energy from the core. However, as she worked, she realized that this wasn't just about mixing materials. It was about understanding the core's nature. The energy was alive, unpredictable, and it needed something far more sophisticated than anything the Zuran had tried. Evelyn spent every night in the lab, sketching out ideas, running simulations, and discussing possibilities with the Zuran scientists. They were smart, yes, but there was a certain rigidity to their thinking. They were used to solving problems with logic and precision, but human creativity was different. Humans could think in ways that didn't always follow the established rules. Zelen, the Zuran leader, had been observing her progress with quiet interest. At first, he had been skeptical, but now, even he could see that Evelyn was on to something. He had never seen a human quite like her. Her mind seemed to work in ways that defied explanation. Every time she faced a setback, she would adapt, shifting her approach until she found a new angle to pursue. One evening, as Evelyn sat alone in the lab, reviewing the data, she had a breakthrough. The containment field needed more than just material adjustments. It needed an emotional element. The Zuran core wasn't just a source of energy. It was a force that reacted to its surroundings. She had seen the fluctuations in the core's behavior during their tests, how it pulsed faster when the scientists got anxious or frustrated. The core wasn't just a machine, it was almost alive. Her heart raced as the idea clicked into place. She rushed to gather the others. The Zuran scientists, including Zelen, looked up in surprise as she entered the meeting room, her eyes wide with excitement. "I've got it," Evelyn said breathlessly, unable to hide her enthusiasm. "We need to introduce an emotional variable into the containment system." The Zuran leader raised an eyebrow. "An emotional variable, you mean? Like a feeling?" "Exactly," Evelyn replied, pacing as she spoke. "The core reacts to emotions, to stress, to pressure. We've been trying to control it with cold, hard science, but that's not how it works. We need something more organic. I'm suggesting we create a containment system that adapts not just to the energy, but to the emotional state of the environment around it." The room fell silent. The Zuran scientists exchanged uncertain glances. Zelen, however, seemed intrigued. "Explain further." Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. "The containment system has to be responsive, not just mechanically, but in a way that considers the intangible aspects of the core. We can use biomimicry, the way certain species on Earth adapt to their environments. There are materials that change properties based on external stimuli, like pressure, light, or heat. If we could combine these with a neural interface, we could create a field that adjusts in real time to the energy fluctuations. But it needs to be more than just science. It has to be intuitive." Zelen's glowing eyes flickered as he processed her words. Intuitive, he repeated as though the word was unfamiliar. You suggest creating a system that can feel the core's energy. Not exactly feel, Evelyn clarified, more like sense. Imagine if the containment system had a feedback loop, where it could sense the energy's behavior and adjust accordingly. It would be like having a living organism interacting with the core, adjusting to its rhythms and patterns, but without the biological limitations. The Zuran scientists seemed hesitant, their minds clearly struggling to grasp the concept. It was a far cry from the precise, logical solutions they had always relied on, but Zelen was different. He had already seen what Evelyn was capable of, and now his curiosity outweighed his doubts. We have nothing to lose, Zelen finally said, turning to the team. We will proceed with this approach. The next several days were a whirlwind of activity. The lab became a hive of innovation, with Evelyn at the center, guiding the Zuran scientists as they built the new containment system. It was a delicate balance, trying to incorporate human creativity into Zuran technology, but little by little, they made progress. Evelyn worked alongside the Zuran engineers, teaching them how to adapt materials that could respond to changes in pressure and energy. She suggested using a combination of carbon nanotubes and biosynthetic fibers that could change their structure depending on the energy flowing through them. It was risky, and there was no guarantee it would work, but it was the only solution she had. As the project neared completion, Evelyn felt a growing sense of anticipation. This was it, the moment that could determine her future on Zira. If she failed, she would be sent back to Earth, her mission a complete failure. But if she succeeded, she would prove that humanity had something unique to offer the Zuran people. Finally, the day arrived when the containment system was ready for its first real test. The chamber was prepared, and the Zuran core was activated. Evelyn stood at the control panel, her fingers hovering over the controls. The room was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Zelen and the other scientists stood silently, watching as the core began to hum, its energy pulses increasing in frequency. Evelyn swallowed hard. This was it. She initiated the system. At first, nothing happened. The core continued to pulse erratically, and the containment field flickered weakly, struggling to hold the energy in place. Evelyn's heart sank. She had hoped for more immediate results, but it wasn't over yet. She adjusted the controls, tweaking the neural feedback system. Slowly, the containment field began to stabilize, the flickering lights smoothing out. The pulses of energy from the core grew more controlled, less chaotic. The feedback loop was working, just as she had hoped. Evelyn watched in awe as the energy fluctuations became less violent, the containment field adapting to the core's needs. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. The core's energy was no longer threatening to break free. After several tense moments, Zelen stepped forward, his glowing eyes bright with surprise and approval. "You have done it," he said, his voice soft but filled with awe. "This is a solution we never thought possible." Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. "It's not perfect, but it's a start." Zelen nodded. "It is more than a start. It is a new way of thinking. You have shown us that creativity can be just as powerful as logic. You have earned your place here, human." Evelyn smiled, her heart lifting with relief and pride. She had done it. She had proven that humanity had something unique to offer, a way of thinking that went beyond what was known, beyond what was logical. And now she had earned the right to stay. The room filled with quiet applause, and for the first time since she had arrived on Zira, Evelyn felt truly at home. The days after the successful containment of the Zuran core were filled with celebration. Evelyn had not only proved her worth but had also earned the respect of the Zuran people. The Zuran scientists, who had once been skeptical, now looked at her with newfound admiration. She had shown them something they had never seen before, the power of human creativity. Zelen, the leader of the Zuran people, had personally congratulated her, and the council had offered her a permanent place on Zira. But Evelyn knew that her journey was far from over. She had not just come to Zira to solve a single problem. She had come to build a future where the humans and the Zuran could work together to achieve even greater things. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn worked alongside the Zuran scientists, helping them design new technologies that combined their advanced knowledge with human creativity. Together, they created machines that could adapt to changing environments, algorithms that could predict and respond to patterns in real time, and systems that bridged the gap between biological and mechanical systems. Evelyn was amazed at how quickly the Zuran people embraced her ideas. They were not just technologically advanced, they were open to learning, to growing, and to thinking outside the boundaries of their own knowledge. It was a collaborative effort, and the results were astounding. But it wasn't just technology that they had begun to work on. The more Evelyn interacted with the Zuran, the more she realized how much they had to offer in other areas as well. They were a people who valued knowledge, but they lacked the kind of emotional intelligence that humans possessed. While they were rational, they struggled to understand the deeper aspects of human interaction, things like empathy, compassion, and resilience. Evelyn had noticed that, despite their immense intelligence, the Zuran lacked the warmth that humans shared. She had spent hours talking to them about Earth's history, about the way humans overcame adversity, the way they came together in times of crisis. The Zuran were fascinated by these stories, often asking her to share more about Earth's greatest triumphs and most difficult struggles. One evening, after another long day of working with the scientists, Evelyn found herself sitting in a quiet garden, the cool air brushing against her skin. The garden was a rare place on Zira, a small area filled with plants that the Zuran had cultivated in an effort to understand life on Earth. As Evelyn gazed at the plants, she thought about her mission. She had come here with one goal, to prove that humanity had something unique to offer. But now, she realized that there was much more to her presence on Zira than just that. Zelen approached her, his tall figure casting a long shadow in the moonlight. His glowing eyes were softer than usual, less intense. "I have been thinking," he said, sitting beside her. "When you arrived here, we saw you as a challenge, but now I see you as something more. You have brought us a new way of thinking, a way that is not just about logic or technology. You have shown us the value of emotions, of understanding the things that cannot be measured or predicted." Evelyn turned to him, surprised by the depth of his words. "I didn't expect to teach you about emotions. I thought I was here to teach you about technology." Zelen shook his head. "Technology is important, yes, but it is not everything. You have shown us that. There is more to life than understanding how things work. We must learn how to live with each other, how to feel, how to care. These are the things that make us truly alive." Evelyn smiled softly. She had always believed that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to feel, to connect with others on a deep emotional level. It was what had driven people to explore the stars, to fight for justice, and to create art and music that resonated across generations. The Zuran had excelled in logic and technology, but they had been missing something essential, the heart of what it meant to truly live. "I'm glad to hear that," Evelyn said, her voice sincere. "I think that's something we can work on together." In the weeks that followed, Evelyn became more than just a scientist on Zira. She became a teacher, a mentor, and a bridge between two worlds. She worked with the Zuran to help them understand the power of emotions, teaching them about empathy, cooperation, and the strength of human connection. Together, they started to build a new kind of society, one that combined the best of both worlds, Zuran intelligence and human compassion. But there were challenges. Some of the more conservative members of the Zuran Council were hesitant to embrace these new ideas. They believed that emotions were unpredictable and dangerous, a distraction from the logical path that had served their species for so long. There were debates, disagreements, and moments of doubt, but Evelyn didn't give up. She knew that true progress wasn't just about technology. It was about learning to live together in harmony. One of the greatest challenges came when a group of Zuran scientists, working on an experimental project, accidentally triggered a massive surge of energy in one of their containment fields. The surge threatened to destabilize the entire lab and potentially the city itself. The Zuran rushed to contain the situation, but it was clear that their technology alone wouldn't be enough to stop the energy from spiraling out of control. Evelyn knew that this was the moment to prove what she had been teaching. She quickly joined the Zuran scientists in the control room, her mind racing. "We need to think outside the box," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "We can't just rely on the technology. We need to work together, trust each other, and act quickly. I'll take the lead, but I need you all to trust me." The Zuran hesitated for a moment, but then, one by one, they nodded. Evelyn worked quickly, combining her human intuition with the Zuran technology to stabilize the energy field. It wasn't easy and the pressure was immense, but Evelyn could feel the support of the Zuran scientists behind her. They had learned to trust her, and more importantly, they had learned to trust each other. In the end, they succeeded. The energy was contained and the crisis was averted. The Zuran scientists, who had once relied solely on logic and technology, now understood something vital. True progress came from cooperation, from understanding, and from using both the mind and the heart. Zelen was there when it was over, his eyes filled with pride. "You have shown us that humanity is not just about surviving," he said. "You are about thriving, about growing together. You are the teachers we didn't know we needed." Evelyn smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come to Zira to prove that humanity had something unique to offer, but in the end, she realized that the greatest lesson had been for her, too. She had come to learn as much as she had to teach. As she stood there, surrounded by the Zuran people who had now become her friends and colleagues, Evelyn knew that this was just the beginning. Together, humans and Zuran would continue to explore the stars, combining their strengths, creating new technologies, and building a future where both species could thrive. And in the end, that was what truly made humanity unique. Not just their ability to solve problems, but their ability to connect, to grow, and to change the world for the better.